A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Shadows of Rejection. Lyra's breath misted in the cold night air as she crouched on the jagged rocks that overlooked what had once been the heart of her pack's territory. The moon hung low and heavy, casting silvery light across the dense forest below. Yet no warmth reached her as she stared blankly into the darkness that now seemed to swallow what little hope had remained. Her past haunted her like a relentless storm, shaking her very soul. She was an outcast, a wolf without a den, a daughter disowned by the very family that was supposed to protect her. It had not always been this way. Once, when she was a child with laughter still fresh and eyes filled with innocent wonder, Lyra had belonged. But the pack's elders whispered behind closed doors, weaving stories of doom and despair around her bloodline. A curse, they said. A stain threatening to unravel our legacy. The words stung more than any physical blow, slicing deep and tearing apart the fragile bonds she had known. Lyra closed her eyes, retreating into the memory of that fateful night. The council chamber had been cold and cavernous, the walls echoing with voices heavy with condemnation. Her mother, fierce, defiant even in defeat, had stood beside her, pleading for mercy, for understanding. But the verdict was cruel and unyielding. Lyra was to be cast out, marked forever as a bearer of misfortune. She is a danger to us all, the Alpha had declared, his voice like iron. The consequences were swift and brutal. Friends vanished, replaced by suspicious glares and whispered slurs. The embrace of family became a chokehold of rejection. And when the moon rose high that night, Lyra's mother vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the bitter scent of loss. Some said the curse finally claimed her. Others whispered she fled, broken by the cruelty. Either way, Lyra was left alone, abandoned not only by pack but by hope itself. Her reputation preceded her wherever she fled. The pack whispered her name with fear and contempt. Outsiders viewed her with wary suspicion as a cursed creature. The malediction woven into her blood was unlike any other, an ancient spell cast by enemies long forgotten, its origins wrapped in darkness and secrecy. Within the pack's strict hierarchy, Lyra had no place. The Alphas ruled with absolute authority. Their word was law. Betas enforced discipline and loyalty like cold steel, while Omegas followed in quiet submission. Each role bound by tradition, strength, and the sacred bond of mating. But for Lyra, the sacred bond was nothing but an empty promise. The curse fractured her ability to shift fully into her wolf form. Her strength faltered, her senses dimmed, and no bond would claim her as mate, no matter how desperate her heart. Upon leaving the pack, Lyra wandered, hiding her nature beneath the guise of a human servant, in a remote village nestled at the forest's edge. There she moved like a ghost, blending with shadows, always watching, always cautious. The villagers knew nothing of her secret, but sensed something distant in her gaze, a quiet sorrow, and a fierce determination to survive. She avoided unnecessary contact, lived in near silence, and never allowed herself the luxury of belonging. But despite her efforts, danger was never far behind. Hunters, both mortal and supernatural, tracked her scent, seeking to destroy or imprison the cursed wolf. Every step outside the safety of her hiding place was a calculated risk. Every night was a gamble against death. Tonight was no different. Lyra had a mission, a desperate plea propelling her forward. Her younger sister, a fragile girl untouched by the pack's brutal politics, was gravely ill. Some rare herb, found only in the heart of rival territory's forest, held the promise of salvation. It was a journey she could not refuse. The path was treacherous, filled with enemies, wild beasts, and the looming threat of capture. But love for family lent her courage beyond reason. Under the cold light of distant stars, she slipped through the thick underbrush, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of peril. Silence stretched around her like a cloak, until a sudden rustling betrayed her presence. Heart pounding, muscles tensed, she melted into the shadows just as two dark figures emerged, moving with predatory precision. Hunters. Armed, merciless. They were the latest in a long line sent to eradicate shifters tainted by blood curses, especially those like Lyra, who stood outside any pack protection. Her survival depended on speed and stealth, but the weight of exhaustion slowed her limbs. A low growl tore through the night, a primal roar that shattered the hunter's confidence. From the gloom emerged a towering figure, his black fur shinier under the moonlight, eyes burning with fierce authority. He moved with power and undeniable purpose, an alpha unmistakable in presence and force. Roman, the enemy leader, the man her pack had warned her about since childhood. Known for his ruthless conquests and icy demeanor, a figure wrapped in legends of bloodshed and unbending will. To Lyra, he was the embodiment of everything she had sworn to despise. Without hesitation, Roman dispatched the hunters with deadly precision. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed, "Stand down. This woman is under my protection." Lyra watched, caught between gratitude and resentment. When Roman turned to regard her, his eyes bored into hers with a complexity that unsettled her. There was no warmth, but not pure hostility either, only a wary calculation. Her pride flared. "I do not belong to you." Roman's lips curled into a challenging smirk. "No, but I claim the right to keep you alive. For now." As silence settled over the forest once more, Lyra's mind swirled with conflicting emotions, fear, defiance, and a spark of something she refused to name, yet knew was dangerous. The night closed around them, full of shadows and promise, the beginning of a battle far greater than either of them could yet comprehend. Chapter 2. Collision of Wills. The tension between them crackled like lightning in the aftermath of violence. Roman stood before Lyra, his massive frame still radiating the raw power of his partial transformation. Dark fur receded from his arms as he shifted back to human form, but his eyes remained those of a predator, golden, intense, and utterly uncompromising. The scent of blood and dominance hung heavy in the air around them. Lyra forced herself to stand, brushing dirt from her clothes with deliberate movements. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to put distance between herself and this man who represented everything she had been taught to fear. Roman Blackthorn, the alpha whose name was whispered in hushed, terrified tones throughout the territories. The destroyer of packs. The conqueror who showed no mercy to those who stood in his way. "You have no right to claim protection over me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I never asked for your help." Roman's lips curved into a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Help? I merely prevented unnecessary bloodshed. Those hunters would have tortured you for information before ending your miserable existence." He stepped closer, and Lyra felt the overwhelming force of his alpha aura pressing against her like a physical weight. "Besides, little wolf, you're trespassing on my territory. That makes you my concern. I'm not your anything." The words burst from her lips with more vehemence than she intended. Years of rejection, of being told she was worthless, fueled her defiance. "And I'm not afraid of you, despite what my pack believes." "Your pack," Roman's voice turned mocking. "The same pack that cast you out like refuse? That branded you as cursed and left you to die alone?" He circled her slowly like a wolf stalking prey. "Tell me, Lyra Moonwhisper, what loyalty do you owe to those who showed you none?" The sound of her full name on his lips sent a chill down her spine. How did he know who she was? Her identity was supposed to be secret, buried along with her past. "How do you know who you are?" Roman completed her question with a predatory grin. "Your reputation precedes you, little curse-bearer. The girl whose bloodline carries ancient maledictions. The wolf who cannot properly shift. The mate no alpha would ever claim." Each word was a deliberate cut, designed to wound. "You're quite famous in certain circles." Rage flared in Lyra's chest, hot and consuming. "You know nothing about me. I know enough." Roman stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I know you're here searching for something, or someone. I know you're desperate enough to risk entering enemy territory despite having no pack protection. And I know that beneath all that defiance burns something far more interesting than the broken little wolf everyone believes you to be." Despite herself, Lyra felt her breath catch. There was something in his tone, a note of genuine curiosity mixed with the expected dominance. It was unsettling, different from the outright rejection or pity she usually encountered. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, fighting the urge to step back from his overwhelming presence. Roman's golden eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Perhaps the better question is what you want from me. You're not stupid enough to venture into Shadowmere territory without knowing the risks. So either you're here to spy for your former pack, or you're after something valuable enough to risk your life." "Neither," Lyra lied smoothly, but Roman's knowing look told her he wasn't fooled. "The rare moonbell herb," he said casually, and Lyra's heart nearly stopped. "It grows only in the heart of my territory, under the protection of ancient magic. Quite valuable for treating certain inherited conditions." Lyra's composure cracked. "How could you possibly know about your sister?" Roman's smile turned genuinely amused at her shock. "Little curse-bearer, you severely underestimate the reach of my intelligence network. Your sister Elena, 14 years old, suffering from the same bloodline curse that afflicts you, though in her case, it manifests as a wasting sickness rather than power instability." The confirmation that he knew about Elena's condition sent panic racing through Lyra's veins. "If you hurt her—" "I have no interest in harming a sick child," Roman cut her off with a wave of his hand. "But I am very interested in you." He stepped closer again, and this time Lyra did retreat, her back hitting the rough bark of an ancient oak. "You see," Lyra Moonwhisper, "your curse is not what your pack believes it to be. They fear what they don't understand. But I understand exactly what you are." "And what am I?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Roman placed one hand against the tree beside her head, effectively trapping her. His voice dropped to a low rumble that sent unwanted shivers through her body. "You're the key to an ancient prophecy, little wolf. The bloodline everyone believes is cursed is actually blessed, marked by powers that could reshape the supernatural world. Your pack rejected a treasure because they were too ignorant to recognize it." Lyra stared at him, her mind reeling. "You're lying." "Am I?" Roman's free hand traced the air near her cheek, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. "Tell me, when you try to shift, what happens? Do you simply fail, or do you feel something else? Something more?" Against her will, Lyra remembered the strange sensations that accompanied her failed transformations, the surge of power that felt too big for her body, the way shadows seemed to bend toward her, the whispers she sometimes heard in languages she didn't understand. Roman's eyes glowed with satisfaction at whatever he read in her expression. "I thought so. Your curse isn't a weakness, Lyra. It's raw, untrained power that your pack was too frightened to help you harness." "Even if that were true," Lyra said, struggling to maintain her defiance, "why would you care? Why help me? Who says I'm helping you?" Roman's voice turned dangerously soft. "Perhaps I simply want to claim that power for myself. Perhaps I see an opportunity to gain something valuable. A weapon. A tool. His gaze dropped to her lips. Possession. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Lyra's heart race for entirely different reasons. The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with an energy she didn't want to acknowledge. Roman was her enemy, the man her pack had trained her to hate and fear. But standing this close to him, feeling the pull of his presence, she couldn't deny the treacherous attraction that bloomed in her chest. "I won't be anyone's possession," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Roman's smile was sharp and knowing. "We'll see about that, little curse-bearer. We'll see." The promise in his words sent both fear and something dangerously close to anticipation racing through her veins as the forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Chapter 3. Forced Alliance. 3 days had passed since Roman's ultimatum, and Lyra found herself trapped in a situation she never could have imagined. The Shadowmere stronghold loomed around her like a fortress of dark stone and twisted iron, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of wolves who regarded her with barely concealed suspicion. She was a prisoner here, though Roman insisted on calling it protection. "The rogue hunters have tripled their numbers," Roman explained during their morning confrontation in his study. Maps covered every surface, marked with red pins indicating enemy movements. "They're not just after you anymore, Lyra. Your appearance in my territory has convinced them that I'm harboring multiple cursed wolves. They want to make an example of us all." Lyra crossed her arms, refusing to be cowed by his logic. "That's not my problem. Release me, and I'll draw them away from your pack." "Absolutely not." Roman's voice carried the unmistakable tone of an alpha's command. "You're staying here until this threat is neutralized. Your safety is not negotiable." "My safety?" Lyra laughed bitterly. "Or your reputation? What would the other alphas think if they knew the mighty Roman Blackthorn couldn't protect one cursed wolf?" Roman's eyes flashed dangerously. But before he could respond, the heavy doors burst open. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair strode in, her beta insignia gleaming on her collar. "Alpha, we have movement on the eastern border. A pack of rogues, heavily armed." "How many?" Roman's demeanor shifted instantly to military precision. 15, maybe 20. They're not trying to hide their approach. The beta's gaze flicked to Lyra with obvious distaste. "They're demanding we surrender the cursed one." Lyra's heart sank. More violence because of her presence. More lives at risk because of what she was. I should go to them. End this before anyone else gets hurt. "Over my dead body," Roman snarled, then caught himself. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're under my protection, Lyra. That means something in this pack. Why?" The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. "Why protect me? You barely know me. I'm nothing but trouble for you and your wolves." Roman stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his golden eyes. "Because," he said quietly, "I know what it's like to be rejected by those who should have protected you." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and unexpected. For the first time since meeting him, Lyra saw past the alpha mask to something raw and human underneath. The beta cleared her throat impatiently. "Alpha? Your orders?" Roman straightened, the moment of vulnerability vanishing. "Mobilize the border guards. I want a defensive perimeter established, but no one engages unless they cross into our territory. And Maya?" He turned to address the beta directly. "Spread the word that anyone who harms our guest will answer to me personally." Maya's expression suggested she strongly disagreed with this decision, but she nodded curtly. "Understood, Alpha." After Maya departed, silence stretched between Lyra and Roman. The weight of his protection felt both comforting and terrifying. No one had ever stood up for her before, certainly not at such personal cost. "You don't have to do this," Lyra said softly. "I can take care of myself." "Can you?" Roman moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. "When those hunters had you cornered 3 nights ago, what exactly was your plan?" Lyra's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I would have figured something out." "You would have died." His bluntness stung, but she couldn't deny its truth. "And your sister would have died too, slowly and painfully while you rotted in a hunter's cage." The mention of Elena sent a spike of panic through Lyra's chest. "Elena, is she safe?" Roman assured her quickly. "I have wolves watching over her, discreetly. She doesn't even know they're there." Lyra stared at him in shock. "You're protecting her too? Why would you?" "Because she matters to you." The simple statement carried more weight than any grand declaration. "And despite what you might think, what matters to you has begun to matter to me." Before Lyra could process the implications of that statement, alarms began blaring throughout the stronghold. Roman's head snapped toward the windows, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "They're attacking," he growled, his body already beginning to shift. "Stay here. Lock the doors and don't come out until I return." "Like hell." Lyra was already moving toward the door. "If this is about me, then I'm going to face it." Roman caught her arm, his grip gentle but unyielding. "Lyra, you can't. Your shifting is unstable, your combat training minimal. You'll only get yourself or others killed." "Maybe," she admitted, then looked him directly in the eyes. "But I won't hide while others fight my battles. That's not who I am." Something shifted in Roman's expression as he studied her face. Respect, perhaps, mixed with frustration and what might have been pride. "You're impossibly stubborn, and you're impossibly controlling." To her surprise, Roman laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "We're going to have problems, aren't we?" "Probably," Lyra agreed, then surprised herself by adding, "But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Then another explosion rocked the building, and Roman's expression hardened back to military focus. "If you're coming, you follow my orders exactly. No heroics, no improvisation. Understood?" Lyra nodded, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Understood. As they raced through the corridors toward the sounds of battle, Lyra found herself running beside rather than behind Roman. For the first time in her life, she wasn't facing danger alone. The realization was both terrifying and unexpectedly liberating. They burst onto the battlements to find Roman's wolves engaged in fierce combat with the hunters. The air reeked of gunpowder and blood, punctuated by howls of pain and rage. In the chaos, Lyra spotted a hunter taking aim at a young wolf who'd been separated from the pack. Without thinking, she lunged forward, her body responding to instincts she didn't fully understand. Power surged through her. Not the broken, painful transformation she was used to, but something else entirely. Shadows seemed to bend to her will, creating a barrier between the hunter and his target. The hunter's shot went wide, and Roman's wolves quickly overwhelmed him. But as the immediate danger passed, Lyra found herself surrounded by stares of awe and fear from Roman's pack. She had just demonstrated the very power that had gotten her marked as cursed. Roman appeared at her side, his eyes wide with something that looked like wonder. "How did you do that?" "I don't know," Lyra whispered, staring at her still trembling hands. "I just reacted." "That wasn't a reaction," Roman said quietly, his voice carrying a note of reverence that made her skin tingle. "That was magic, Lyra. Real, powerful magic." As the pack secured the area and tended to their wounded, Lyra stood frozen in the aftermath of her revelation. For the first time, her curse had felt less like a burden and more like a gift, and Roman was looking at her not with fear or pity, but with something dangerously close to admiration. Chapter 4. Dangerous Attraction. The following weeks transformed Lyra's understanding of everything she thought she knew about herself and Roman's pack. What had begun as reluctant protection had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. The Shadowmere wolves, initially suspicious of the cursed outsider, gradually began to accept her presence after witnessing her display of power during the hunter attack. Roman had become her constant companion, citing security concerns. But Lyra suspected his motivations ran deeper. He watched her with an intensity that made her skin burn, his golden eyes tracking her every movement, with a hunger that had nothing to do with predatory instinct and everything to do with desire. "Your control is improving," Roman observed as they trained in the early morning hours. He had insisted on personally overseeing her magical development, claiming her abilities were too valuable to risk with anyone else. "But you're still holding back." Lyra wiped sweat from her brow, frustrated by her continued inability to fully harness the shadows that seemed to respond to her emotions. "I'm not holding back. I'm being careful. There's a difference." "Is there?" Roman moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the enclosed training room. "Or are you still afraid of what you might become if you truly let go?" The question hit too close to home. Since childhood, Lyra had been conditioned to suppress her abilities, to see them as dangerous and uncontrollable. Even now, with Roman encouraging her to embrace her power, some part of her feared the consequences of losing control. "Maybe I have good reason to be afraid," she said, stepping back as Roman approached. The movement brought her against the stone wall, effectively trapping her between cold stone and his heated presence. "Of your power?" Roman placed one hand against the wall beside her head, his body forming a cage around her. "Or of me?" The honest answer was both, but Lyra wasn't about to admit that. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm not afraid of you, Roman Blackthorn." "No?" His free hand came up to trace the line of her jaw, the touch sending electricity racing through her veins. "Then why does your heart race every time I'm near? Why do you tremble when I touch you?" "Anger," Lyra lied, her voice breathless despite her attempts to sound unaffected. Roman's smile was knowing and devastatingly attractive. "Liar." Before she could protest, he leaned closer, his lips barely a breath away from hers. The space between them crackled with tension, and Lyra found herself torn between the desire to close the distance and the desperate need to maintain some semblance of self-control. "You want to know why I protect you, Lyra?" Roman's voice was rough with barely restrained desire. "It has nothing to do with prophecies or politics. It's purely selfish. I protect you because the thought of losing you drives me to madness." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable in a way she had never expected from the feared Alpha. Lyra stared into his golden eyes, seeing past the mask of power to the man underneath. Lonely, burdened by responsibility, and desperate for connection. "Roman," she whispered, her resolve crumbling. The moment shattered when Maya burst through the training room doors, her expression grim. "Alpha, we have a problem. The Council of Alphas has called an emergency meeting. They're demanding you explain why you're harboring a cursed wolf." Roman stepped back from Lyra, his expression instantly hardening into military precision. "When?" "Tonight. They're expecting you at the neutral grounds by midnight." Maya's gaze flicked to Lyra with barely concealed concern. "They specifically mentioned her by name, Alpha. Someone's been feeding them information." Lyra felt ice flood her veins. The Council of Alphas was the governing body that maintained order among the shifter packs. Their word was law, and their judgment, absolute. If they had turned their attention to her, it meant her presence was being seen as a threat to the supernatural community's stability. "I have to go," she said, moving toward the door. "If I leave now, they'll have no reason to—" "You're not going anywhere." Roman's command froze her in place, the Alpha authority in his voice compelling obedience despite her desire to flee. "Running will only confirm their suspicions that you're dangerous." "I am dangerous," Lyra protested. "You've seen what I can do. They're right to be concerned." "They're afraid," Roman corrected. "There's a difference. Fear makes people do stupid things, like trying to destroy something they don't understand instead of learning to work with it." Maya stepped forward, her expression troubled. "Alpha, with respect, the Council's concerns aren't entirely unfounded. Her power is unprecedented, and without proper training or a pack bond to anchor her, she could potentially revolutionize everything we know about shifter abilities," Roman interrupted sharply. "Her bloodline carries gifts that haven't been seen in centuries. We should be celebrating that, not cowering from it." The passion in his defense of her sent warmth spreading through Lyra's chest, even as fear continued to claw at her throat. "What will you tell them?" Roman turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "The truth, that you're under my protection, that your abilities are being properly managed, and that anyone who threatens you will answer to me personally. And if they demand you choose between me and your pack's safety?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Lyra watched Roman's face carefully, looking for any sign of hesitation, any indication that his protection had limits. She found none. "Then they'll learn exactly how far I'm willing to go to keep you safe," he said simply. The absolute certainty in his voice took her breath away. No one had ever put her first before, certainly not at such potential cost. The realization that Roman was willing to risk everything for her was both thrilling and terrifying. "I should come with you," Lyra said, though the thought of facing a room full of hostile alphas made her stomach churn. "Let them see that I'm not the monster they think I am." "Absolutely not." Roman's tone brooked no argument. "The council chambers are warded against supernatural abilities. Your power would be suppressed, leaving you vulnerable, and some of those alphas have been looking for an excuse to eliminate potential threats for decades." Maya nodded in agreement. "He's right. Some members of the council see any deviation from traditional pack structure as heresy. They'd use your presence as justification for extreme measures." Lyra felt frustration building in her chest. Once again, others were making decisions about her life without her input. "So, I'm supposed to hide here while you fight my battles? You're supposed to trust me," Roman said, moving close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Can you do that, Lyra? Can you trust me to handle this?" The question was loaded with more than just the immediate crisis. He was asking her to trust him with her life, her future, her heart. The smart thing would be to maintain her independence, to refuse to rely on anyone else's protection. But as she looked into Roman's eyes, she found herself nodding. "I trust you," she whispered, the words carrying more weight than any formal oath. Something shifted in Roman's expression, a flash of possessive satisfaction that made her pulse race. Before she could analyze the emotion, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both claiming and promise. The contact was electric, sending shockwaves through her entire system. Lyra found herself responding instinctively, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. For a moment, the world narrowed to just this: the taste of him, the warmth of his body, the overwhelming rightness of being in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Roman rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough with emotion. "When I come back from this meeting, we're going to finish this conversation." The promise in his words sent anticipation racing through her veins as he stepped away, leaving her aching for more contact. As Roman and Maya departed to prepare for the council meeting, Lyra touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. For the first time in her life, she had something worth fighting for. The question was whether they would both survive long enough to explore what was growing between them. Chapter 5. Betrayal and Revelation. The hours passed like centuries as Lyra waited for Roman's return from the council meeting. She paced the confines of his private chambers, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. Something felt wrong, a heaviness in the air that made her skin crawl, and her newly awakened powers stir restlessly beneath the surface. When Maya finally returned alone just before dawn, Lyra's worst fears were confirmed by the devastation written across the beta's face. "Where is he?" Lyra demanded, her heart already sinking. Maya's composed exterior cracked, revealing the anguish beneath. "Gone. The council, they took him, Lyra. They declared him compromised by harboring you and stripped him of his alpha status pending a formal trial." The words hit Lyra like physical blows. "What? They can't just... They can, and they did." Maya's voice was bitter with rage and grief. "Apparently, someone provided them with detailed intelligence about your abilities, your bloodline, even your sister's condition. They knew things that only a handful of people in this pack were privy to. Betrayal." The word tasted like ash in Lyra's mouth. Someone within Roman's own pack had sold him out, used her as a weapon against the man who had protected her when no one else would. Who? The single word carried all of Lyra's fury and desperation. Maya's expression darkened further. "Elder Thorn, Roman's own uncle. He's been feeding information to the council for weeks, documenting every interaction between you and Roman, every display of your power. He convinced them that Roman was under some kind of supernatural influence, that your curse was corrupting his judgment." Lyra felt her knees buckle. She sank onto Roman's bed, surrounded by his scent, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her presence had cost him. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't come here, if I hadn't stayed..." "Stop." Maya's command was sharp and authoritative. "This isn't about you, Lyra. This is about power." Thorn has been waiting for an opportunity to challenge Roman's leadership for years. You were just the excuse he needed, but Roman lost everything because of me," Lyra whispered, tears burning her eyes. "His pack, his status, his freedom. And he'd do it again in a heartbeat," Maya interrupted fiercely. "You think Roman didn't know the risks? He chose you, Lyra. Not because he was cursed or influenced, but because he saw something in you worth fighting for." Before Lyra could respond, urgent howls echoed across the territory, the warning cry of wolves under attack. Maya's head snapped toward the window, her nostrils flaring as she scented the air. "Hunters," she growled. "A massive force, moving in from all directions. They're coordinating with the council's forces." Lyra's blood ran cold. "They're going to wipe out the entire pack. Not if I can help it." Maya was already moving, grabbing weapons from Roman's armory. "But we need to evacuate the non-combatants first. The children, the elders." "No." Lyra stood, power beginning to surge through her veins like liquid fire. "I won't run again. I won't let innocent people die because of what I am." Maya turned to stare at her, seeing something in Lyra's expression that made her step back. "Lyra, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time everyone learned exactly what they're so afraid of." Lyra moved to the window, looking out at the attacking forces surrounding the stronghold. There were so many. Hundreds of hunters and council enforcers, all bent on destroying anyone connected to her. But as she watched them advance, something inside her shifted. The curse she had spent her entire life seeing as a burden suddenly felt different, not like chains holding her back, but like power waiting to be unleashed. "Maya," she said quietly, not turning from the window. "I need you to get word to Roman, wherever they're holding him. Tell him I'm sorry, and that I understand now why he protected me. Lyra. Don't tell him that I love him." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, but Lyra found she didn't regret the words. They were true, had been true since that first kiss. Maybe even before. "And tell him that I'm finally ready to become what I was always meant to be." Lyra turned from the window, and Maya gasped at what she saw. Power radiated from Lyra's form like heat waves, making the air itself seem to shimmer. Her eyes had begun to glow with an otherworldly light, and shadows danced around her like living things. "My bloodline isn't cursed," Lyra continued, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat. "It's blessed. We're not just shifters, Maya. We're something else entirely. Bridges between the mortal world and the realm of ancient magic. The Council fears us because they know we could change everything. Lyra, please," Maya pleaded, fear evident in her voice now. "You don't know what you're unleashing. If you lose control, I won't lose control." Lyra smiled, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely certain of herself. For the first time ever, I'm in complete control. She walked past Maya toward the door, her form beginning to shift in ways that defied everything they knew about shifter physiology. The transformation wasn't painful like her previous attempts. It was liberating, like finally allowing herself to breathe after holding her breath for years. "Where are you going?" Maya called after her. "To end this," Lyra replied without looking back. "To show them all exactly what they created when they tried to destroy something they didn't understand." As Lyra descended toward the main courtyard where the battle was already raging, she could feel the ancient power of her bloodline flowing through her veins like molten gold. The magic that had been suppressed and feared for generations was finally free, and with it came knowledge, understanding of what her ancestors had been, what she could become. The hunters surrounding the stronghold were about to learn why her kind had been legends, long before they became myths. But even as power coursed through her, even as she prepared to unleash abilities that would reshape the supernatural world, one thought dominated her mind. Roman. She had to survive this. Had to find a way to free him. Because losing him now would be like losing a part of her soul. The curse-bearer was about to become something far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The question was whether the world was ready for what she was about to unleash. Outside, the first screams began, as shadows given substance descended upon the attacking forces, and Lyra Moonwhisper stepped into her true destiny at last. Chapter 6. The Shadow War. The transformation that swept through Lyra was unlike anything the supernatural world had ever witnessed. As she stepped onto the battlefield, her human form began to shift in ways that defied every law of shifter physiology. Her skin took on an ethereal luminescence. Shadows writhed around her like living extensions of her will, and her eyes blazed with the accumulated power of generations. The hunters attacking the stronghold froze in terror, as darkness itself seemed to rise against them. Lyra raised her hands, and the very air responded to her command. Shadows coalesced into tangible barriers, deflecting bullets and magical attacks alike. Where her power touched the ground, ancient protective wards blazed to life, magic so old it predated the Council itself. "Impossible," breathed one of the Council enforcers, his weapon trembling in his grip. The Moonwhisper bloodline was supposed to be extinct. Not extinct, Lyra's voice carried across the battlefield, with supernatural resonance. Suppressed, hidden, feared by those too small-minded to understand what we truly are. She gestured, and tendrils of shadow wrapped around the enforcer's weapons, crushing them to twisted metal. But fear has consequences. The battle that followed was less a fight than a demonstration of power that had been dormant for centuries. Lyra moved through the attacking forces like a force of nature, her abilities growing stronger with each passing moment. She didn't kill. That would have made her the monster they claimed she was. Instead, she bound them in shadows, stripped them of their weapons, and sent them fleeing in terror. But even as she dominated the immediate battlefield, Lyra's enhanced senses detected a far greater threat approaching. In the distance, she could sense Roman, imprisoned, weakened, but alive. The knowledge that he lived gave her strength, but she could also feel the magical restraints binding him, draining his life force with each passing hour. "Lyra!" Maya's voice cut through the chaos as the beta fought her way to Lyra's side. "The Council isn't just holding Roman, they're using him as bait. This entire attack is designed to force you to reveal your true power." The revelation hit Lyra like a physical blow. She had played directly into their hands, demonstrating exactly the kind of threat they claimed she represented. Where are they holding him? The binding chambers, beneath the Council stronghold. But Lyra, it's a trap. They want you to come for him. They have weapons designed specifically to contain your kind of magic. Lyra's power flared dangerously, as rage threatened to consume her rational thought. The shadows around her writhed with increasing violence, responding to her emotional state. Several of the remaining attackers backed away in terror, as the very air around her began to crack with supernatural energy. "Let them try," she snarled, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ground tremble. "They have no idea what they're dealing with." But even as the words left her lips, Lyra felt a new presence approaching, one that made her newly awakened power recoil in recognition. Elder Thorn materialized from the retreating forces, but he was no longer the frail old wolf she remembered. Dark energy writhed around him like a second skin, and his eyes blazed with malevolent power. "Ah, there she is," Thorn said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The little curse-bearer, finally showing her true colors. Do you know how long I've waited for this moment, child? You betrayed your own nephew," Lyra accused, her power coiling defensively around her. "Your own alpha," Thorn laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Roman was weak, corrupted by sentiment and misplaced loyalty. But you, my dear, you're exactly what we needed to justify what comes next." As he spoke, more figures emerged from the shadows. Other council members, but like Thorn, they radiated dark energy that felt wrong, corrupted. Lyra realized with growing horror that this went far deeper than political maneuvering. "You're not trying to stop the old bloodlines," she said, understanding flooding through her. "You're trying to steal our power." "Very good," Thorn purred. "The Council has been infiltrated for decades by those who understand that true power requires sacrifice. Your bloodline, the old magics, they belong in the hands of those strong enough to wield them properly." The corrupted council members began to circle her, their combined dark energy pressing against her defenses. Lyra could feel their magic trying to bind her, to drain the power she had only just learned to access. But beneath the immediate threat, another realization struck her. This wasn't just about her. This conspiracy threatened every supernatural creature who carried old blood, ancient gifts. "Roman knew," she whispered. "That's why he protected me. Not just because of what I am, but because of what you represent." "Roman suspected," Thorn corrected, "but he could never prove anything. Until now. His capture was necessary to draw you out, but his usefulness has ended. Even now, the binding rituals are draining his life force to power our next phase." Fury exploded through Lyra's system like liquid fire. The shadows around her erupted outward, shattering the magical bindings the corrupted council members had been weaving. For a moment, her power blazed so brightly that even the sun seemed dim by comparison. "You made one mistake," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "You think power can be stolen, controlled, owned. But the magic you're trying to claim doesn't work that way." She raised her hands, and the very fabric of reality seemed to respond. The shadows didn't just move at her command. They became part of her. Extensions of a will that had finally embraced its true nature. "My bloodline doesn't carry a curse. We are the guardians, the bridges between worlds. And you've just threatened the one person in existence who could have helped you understand that." The battle that erupted was unlike anything the supernatural world had ever seen. Lyra's power clashed against the corrupted magic of the conspirators, light and shadow dancing in patterns that rewrote the laws of physics. The very ground beneath them cracked and reformed as ancient energies warred for dominance. But even as she fought, Lyra could feel Roman's life force weakening. Whatever they were doing to him was accelerating, and she was running out of time. She had to end this quickly, had to reach him before the binding rituals claimed his life. With a cry that shattered windows for miles around, Lyra gathered every ounce of her newfound power and directed it not at her enemies, but at the magical bonds holding Roman. Across the distance, she felt the bindings crack, felt his strength begin to return. The effort left her momentarily vulnerable, and Thorn struck like a serpent. Dark energy wrapped around her, burning like acid against her defenses. Foolish child. Love makes you weak. No, Lyra gasped, fighting against the binding magic. Love makes me stronger than you could ever understand. As the words left her lips, she felt it. Roman's presence, growing stronger as he broke free of his magical prison. Their bond, forged in trust and tempered by sacrifice, blazed to life across the distance between them. And through that connection, Lyra suddenly understood the true nature of her power. She wasn't meant to stand alone. The old bloodlines, the ancient magics, they were strongest when united by genuine bonds, not chains of domination. As Roman's strength joined with hers across their growing connection, Lyra's power exploded beyond anything she had previously imagined. The corrupted council members screamed as their stolen magic was torn away, purified, and redirected. Thorn's dark energy shattered like glass against the combined force of Lyra's awakened heritage and Roman's unwavering loyalty. In the distance, Lyra could sense Roman approaching, free and furious, and very much alive. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Claiming. Roman arrived like a force of nature, his powerful form cutting through the remaining chaos with lethal precision. The magical bonds that had weakened him were shattered, and his golden eyes blazed with a fury that made even Lyra's enemies step back in terror. But when his gaze found hers across the battlefield, the rage transformed into something infinitely more powerful. Pure, devastating love. Lyra, he breathed, and the sound of her name on his lips sent strength coursing through her veins. The corrupted council members who remained standing regrouped quickly, recognizing that their window of opportunity was closing. Thorn raised his hands, dark energy swirling around him like a maelstrom. "Kill them both," he commanded his followers. "We can extract what we need from their corpses." But as the words left his lips, something unexpected happened. The shadows that had been responding to Lyra's will suddenly expanded, reaching out to touch Roman. Where they made contact, his own power flared, not with darkness, but with brilliant silver light that complemented her shadows perfectly. "Impossible," Thorn snarled. "The bonding ritual hasn't been completed. You can't access each other's power without what?" Roman's voice carried the absolute authority of an alpha as he moved to stand beside Lyra. "Without your permission, without following your corrupt version of ancient law?" Lyra felt their connection solidifying, becoming something more profound than mere attraction or even love. This was recognition on a soul-deep level, the kind of bond that transcended pack politics and council edicts. "The claiming doesn't require ritual," she said, understanding flooding through her. "It requires choice." Roman turned to face her fully, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "Then choose, Lyra Moonwhisper. Choose to be mine, as I choose to be yours. Not because of prophecy or politics, but because I love you beyond reason, beyond fear, beyond the very boundaries of what should be possible." The formal words of claiming hung in the air between them, weighted with power and promise. Around them, the battle had stopped, as both friend and foe recognized the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just two individuals choosing each other. This was the joining of bloodlines that could reshape the supernatural world. "I choose you," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural resonance. "Roman Blackthorn, I claim you as my mate, my alpha, my equal in all things. I offer my power to strengthen yours, my heart to heal yours, my soul to complete yours." The moment the words left her lips, the world exploded with light and shadow. Power erupted from both of them, spiraling together in patterns that defied description. Where Lyra's shadows met Roman's silver fire, new magic was born. Something that belonged to neither light nor dark, but existed in the space between, bridging opposites and making them whole. Thorn screamed in rage and terror as their combined power washed over him. The dark energy he had stolen, the corrupted magic he had been hoarding, was torn away and purified. Around the battlefield, his remaining followers fled as their artificial powers collapsed, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. "This isn't over," Thorn snarled, even as his own form began to wither without the stolen magic sustaining him. "The Council will never accept this union. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Let them try," Roman said calmly, his hand finding Lyra's and their fingers intertwining. The simple contact sent new waves of power through both of them, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. "They'll find us much harder to kill than they anticipated." As if to demonstrate his point, Roman's silver fire suddenly blazed brighter, fed by Lyra's shadow magic. The combined energy lashed out, not to harm, but to reveal. And suddenly, everyone on the battlefield could see the truth. The corrupted council members' stolen power was made visible, the dark energy that had been feeding on sacrificed lives now exposed for all to witness. "Murderers," Maya breathed, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent battlefield. "You've been killing our kind to steal their magic." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled forces. Even those who had come to fight Lyra began to turn on the corrupted council members, realizing they had been manipulated into serving those who would ultimately destroy them all. But Lyra barely noticed the political ramifications. Her entire focus was on Roman, on the incredible sensation of their souls intertwining, their powers complementing and strengthening each other. For the first time in her life, she felt truly complete. "How does it feel?" Roman asked softly, his forehead resting against hers as their combined energy continued to swirl around them. "Like coming home," Lyra whispered. "Like finally understanding what I was meant to be." "And what's that?" "Yours," she said simply. "And you're mine." Roman's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. "Always," he promised. "In this life and whatever comes after." The claiming ritual reached its crescendo as their powers fully merged, creating something entirely new. Lyra could feel her abilities stabilizing, growing stronger but also more controlled. The wild, dangerous magic that had frightened her was now tempered by Roman's steady strength, while her shadows added depth and complexity to his silver fire. Around them, the battlefield was transforming. Where their combined power touched the ground, new life began to sprout. Flowers that bloomed in impossible colors. Trees that grew with silver bark and shadow-dark leaves. The very land was responding to their union, recognizing the birth of something that had never existed before. "Look," Maya called out, her voice filled with wonder. Lyra and Roman turned to see that their pack members, those who had survived the battle, were changing too. Not physically, but their auras were brightening, their own magical abilities growing stronger simply by being in proximity to the newly bonded pair. The old bloodlines, Lyra realized. Our union isn't just about us. It's about restoring what was lost, healing what was broken. Roman nodded, his understanding matching hers perfectly through their bond. The council tried to divide us, to make us fear our own power. But together, we're stronger than they ever imagined possible. As the last of Thorn's corrupted followers fled into the forest, Lyra felt a profound sense of completion, not just because she had found her mate, but because she finally understood her purpose. She wasn't cursed, she was blessed. And with Roman at her side, she could help others like her discover the same truth. "What happens now?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Roman's eyes glowed with determination and love in equal measure. "Now we build something new. A place where the old bloodlines can flourish without fear, where power is shared rather than hoarded, where love is stronger than politics." "Together?" Lyra asked, though she already knew his answer. "Always together," Roman confirmed, pulling her close for a kiss that sealed their bond completely. As their lips met, power erupted from them one final time, sending a pulse of pure magic across the land that would be felt by every supernatural creature for thousands of miles. It was a declaration, a promise, and a warning all at once. The old world was ending, and something beautiful and terrible and wonderful was being born to take its place. Chapter 8. The New Dawn. 3 months later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Lyra stood on the balcony of what had once been the Shadowmere stronghold, now expanded into something that resembled more of a sanctuary than a fortress. The morning sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, highlighting the impossible beauty that had grown from the ruins of their battle. Where their combined power had touched the earth during the claiming ritual, a new kind of ecosystem had flourished. Trees with silver bark grew alongside flowers that bloomed in shadow-dark petals, creating a harmony between light and darkness that perfectly reflected their union. "Admiring your handiwork?" Roman's voice carried warmth and amusement as he approached from behind, his arms sliding around her waist to pull her back against his chest. "Our handiwork," Lyra corrected, leaning into his embrace. Through their mate bond, she could feel his contentment, his pride in what they had built together. "I never could have imagined this when I was running through the forest that first night." "Terrified and defiant," Roman murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine despite the months they'd been together. "I knew then that you would change everything." Below them, the grounds buzzed with activity as dozens of supernatural beings went about their daily routines. The sanctuary they had created had become a beacon for those carrying old bloodlines, those who had been rejected or feared by traditional pack structures, wolves who couldn't shift properly, witches whose magic manifested in unexpected ways, hybrids who had never fit into any established category. All found welcome here. "The council's representatives will arrive this afternoon," Roman said, his tone growing more serious. "Maya thinks they're finally ready to negotiate." The political ramifications of their union had rippled throughout the supernatural world. The exposure of the corruption within the council's ranks had led to massive upheavals, with several traditional alphas being removed from power and new leadership emerging. Those who remained were gradually recognizing that the old ways of suppressing different bloodlines was not only cruel, but ultimately self-destructive. "Let them come," Lyra said confidently. "They'll see what we've built here and understand that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." Through the large windows of the main hall, they could see children playing, little ones whose mixed heritage had once marked them as outcasts, now laughing and using their unique abilities freely under the careful guidance of trained mentors. Among them was Elena, Lyra's sister, whose health had improved dramatically once she was allowed to embrace, rather than suppress, her magical nature. "She's happy here," Roman observed, following Lyra's gaze to where Elena was teaching a group of younger children how to communicate with the shadow-touched plants that grew throughout the sanctuary. "For the first time in her life, she feels normal," Lyra agreed. "No one here looks at her like she's broken or dangerous, the same way no one looks at you that way anymore." Lyra turned in Roman's arms to face him directly. The months had been kind to both of them. Roman's features had softened from the harsh lines of constant vigilance, while Lyra had gained a confidence and grace that came from finally understanding her own worth. Their bond had deepened beyond the initial claiming, creating a connection so profound that they often knew each other's thoughts without speaking. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up your traditional pack structure, challenging the council, choosing me over everything you'd known before?" Roman's answer was immediate and unwavering. "Never. Not for a single moment." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Lyra, what we have here, this community, this family we've built, it's everything I never knew I wanted. You didn't just save my life that night. You gave me a purpose worth living for." Before Lyra could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway behind them, her expression mixing professional urgency with personal affection. The beta had adapted remarkably well to their new way of doing things, her natural protective instincts channeled into overseeing the sanctuary's security and helping newcomers integrate into their unconventional community. "Sorry to interrupt," Maya said with a knowing smile, "but we have visitors arriving earlier than expected. And Lyra, you're going to want to see this." Curious, Lyra and Roman followed Maya through the stronghold's transformed corridors. What had once been stark military efficiency now reflected the warm, welcoming atmosphere of their sanctuary. Artwork from various supernatural cultures adorned the walls, and the scent of multiple cooking styles wafted from communal kitchens, where pack members from different traditions shared their heritage through food. They emerged onto the main grounds to find a delegation unlike any Lyra had ever seen. Instead of the intimidating, uniformly threatening presence she associated with council representatives, this group was diverse. Alphas, yes, but also witches, fae representatives, and individuals whose mixed heritage was obvious in their unique auras. At the head of the delegation stood a woman whose presence commanded immediate respect. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, and her eyes held the wisdom of centuries. When she smiled at Lyra, it was with genuine warmth rather than political calculation. "Lyra Moonwhisper Blackthorn," the woman said, using the formal name that acknowledged both Lyra's heritage and her mate bond. "I am Elder Sage, representing the Reformed Council. We come not as adversaries, but as allies seeking to learn from what you've accomplished here." Lyra felt Roman's surprise through their bond. This was far from the confrontational meeting they had expected. "You're welcome here," Lyra said carefully. "But forgive me if I'm suspicious of council representatives bearing gifts of friendship." Elder Sage laughed, a sound full of genuine amusement. "Your caution is wise and entirely justified. The council you knew was corrupted, focused on maintaining power rather than serving our people. What we're building now is different, a governing body that celebrates diversity rather than fearing it." Over the next several hours, the delegation toured the sanctuary, observing the successful integration of different supernatural bloodlines, the training programs that helped individuals master unique abilities, and the research being conducted into ancient magics that had been suppressed for generations. Lyra watched their faces carefully, noting the growing awe and respect in their expressions. "This shouldn't be possible," one of the visiting alphas murmured, as he watched a group of teenagers whose mixed heritage allowed them to channel both elemental magic and shape-shifting abilities. "Traditional pack structure says these combinations are unstable, dangerous. Traditional pack structure was wrong about a lot of things," Roman replied diplomatically. "When you try to force complex beings into simple categories, you lose the richness that makes us strong." As the sun began to set, the delegation gathered in the main hall for a formal dinner that had become a celebration of everything the sanctuary represented. Dozens of community members shared the evening meal, their conversations flowing in multiple languages, and their magical auras creating a light show that rivaled any fireworks display. Elder Sage stood to address the assembly, her voice carrying clearly throughout the hall. "What I've witnessed here today gives me hope for our future. You've proven that the old prejudices, the ancient fears that divided us, were not only wrong, but actively harmful. The Reformed Council would like to propose a partnership, sharing your methods with other communities, establishing sanctuaries like this throughout our territories." "And in return?" Lyra asked, though she already suspected the answer. "In return, we offer full recognition of your authority here, protection under reformed supernatural law, and resources to expand your work. The age of suppression is ending. The age of integration has begun." As the formal negotiations continued late into the evening, Lyra found herself standing once again on the balcony where the day had begun. The sanctuary spread out below her, lights twinkling in windows where families had found safety and belonging. In the distance, she could see the beginnings of new construction, housing for the growing number of refugees seeking haven, training facilities for specialized magical instruction, research centers where ancient knowledge was being rediscovered and preserved. Roman joined her, as she had known he would, their bond drawing them together like gravity. "Regrets?" he asked, echoing her earlier question. Lyra considered the question seriously, thinking of the frightened, lonely girl who had fled through the forest just months ago. That girl could never have imagined standing here now, confident, powerful, surrounded by family and community, partnered with a man who saw her as an equal rather than a burden. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Only gratitude." "For what?" Lyra turned to face him, seeing not just her mate, but her partner in creating something that would outlast them both. "For you. For this. For the chance to prove that being different doesn't mean being wrong." As Roman pulled her close for a kiss that still made her heart race after months of such moments, Lyra felt their future spreading out before them like an unwritten book. There would be challenges ahead. Change never came easily, and there were still those who would resist the new ways. But they would face those challenges together, with the strength of their bond and the support of the community they had built. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in loneliness or fear, but in celebration of finding where they belonged. The sound was picked up by others throughout the sanctuary, creating a chorus that spoke of hope, acceptance, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The cursed had become the blessed, and their love had lit the way forward for countless others. But Lyra and Roman's journey is just the beginning. Across our world, countless other souls are struggling with their own darkness, searching for acceptance, fighting battles that no one else understands. Their tales of transformation and love are waiting to be discovered. By choosing not to subscribe, you're leaving these stories untold, these hearts unheard. You're walking away after witnessing this beautiful ending without helping others find their own light. A true member of our supernatural family never abandons those still lost in the shadows. If you're ready to join our family, share your thoughts in the comments below. Our community truly values you taking this journey with us tonight. Your time means everything to us. If this story touched your heart, we have an entire collection of passionate tales waiting for you. Stories of forbidden love, second chances, and supernatural bonds that defy all odds. Why not lose yourself in another adventure right now? And if you want to ensure you never miss when we release our next emotional journey, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We'd be honored to welcome you into our storytelling family. Until our paths cross again in the next tale. Thank you for being here with us tonight. But Lyra and Roman's journey is just the beginning. Across our world, countless other souls are struggling with their own darkness, searching for acceptance, fighting battles that no one else understands. Their tales of transformation and love are waiting to be discovered. By choosing not to subscribe, you're leaving these stories untold, these hearts unheard. You're walking away after witnessing this beautiful ending without helping others find their own light. A true member of our supernatural family never abandons those still lost in the shadows. If you're ready to join our family, share your thoughts about this tale in the comments below. Our community truly values you taking this journey with us tonight. Your time means everything to us. If this story touched your heart, we have an entire collection of passionate tales waiting for you. Stories of forbidden love, second chances, and supernatural bonds that defy all odds. Why not lose yourself in another adventure right now? And if you want to ensure you never miss when we release our next emotional journey, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We'd be honored to welcome you into our storytelling family. Until our paths cross again in the next tale. Thank you for being here with us tonight.